Welcome back everyone to J-Face Games. Today we are starting to get into the beta. What I have here is if you go to the game design pane, which you should have a link to in the About Us section of this YouTube channel. Now you have the beta section. And eventually I'll have some sort of like PDF printout so you can print these out nicely once we've finished them, but they're here for you to kind of just see, browse, whatever you want to say. So the way we're going to start this is we're going to start with the actual character designs, okay? Now I'm pretty much just going to try and do archetypes based on the different attributes. We're going to have a defender, primary defender, we're going to have a controller, we're going to have a striker, and we're going to have a leader. So today we're going to start with the defender. Now, a lot of this didn't get fleshed out until I started thinking about movement, which is the last video, and these aren't fully fleshed out even now. I'm going to kind of work through this process a little bit with you guys, and I think I've already got a couple little snags or things that are up for debate. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the defender. Let's do it like this. I think it's a nice big old header. The defender. So first we have attributes. So for our attributes, we're going to have defender, striker, controller, and leader. And so at this point in time, I don't know how, we have the idea that this system is going to be all based on, you have a point pool and then you use those point pools to buy different things. You buy attributes, you buy skills, you buy feats and powers, etc. Well, at this point in time, I have no idea what that's going to look like in terms of what's a good amount of points to start off with. So I'm trying to just create, what do I think would be a good looking character to kind of start with? And then once we've done that for all the classes, we'll kind of work backwards to, okay, how many points is that roughly? Like, what does that actually equate to? Okay. With that, well, let's do this real quick. So defender. So obviously this is going to be his primary stat. So I'm going to do a D8 plus 1. That sounds good. This guy is going to have controller as his secondary stat. So we'll do D6. I think that originally I had said that, let's pull it up here. I think originally I had thought that when it came to the dice mechanics, that a D8, was it D8 plus 1? Yeah, this would be the expected normal gamer, D8 plus 1. So let's stick with that. Let's stick with that. So D8 plus 1 for his primary stat. Cool. D6 for his controller. Let's go D6 for his strike, and then we're going to say a D4 for his leadership. So I'd say that looks good. Now we're going to do skills. These characters are also sort of like kind of just neutral. You can make them any race, gender, background, whatever you kind of want to do. That's up to you. So this is actually technically backgrounds because we decided to settle on backgrounds. Let's make him a blacksmith. We'll go a little bit more of like traditional archetypes. Blacksmith 3, and we'll say I think blacksmith 3 and town guard 2. He was a guard at one point in time. That sounds good. Actually, you know what? Let's do town guard for blacksmith 1, because if this is a defender, having a background where you were kind of a guard of sorts, that kind of makes more sense. So that's kind of cool. I like that. All right, now we get into a couple different things. One, we're going to have to get some sort of like the equivalent of hit points, right? And then we're going to have the powers or feats, okay? And this is where already something has kind of changed in my brain in terms of this sort of power pool concept. Before I started calling it power pool or stamina or hit points. Now after talking to a buddy, I like the idea of soul points, right? So your soul points in essence are, this is gonna be that pool you start off with. Say there's like, 40 points or whatever the case is. And then you're using soul points to buy, like we talked about, you're buying attribute dice, your background points, your powers and feats, and then leftover, what's left equals your soul pool, right? Or your soul power pool, whatever you want to call it. Like, we'll get there. I'd love to hear, thoughts on names. And this soul pool is your hit points, right? And what's cool about this also is that this soul pool is not just your hit points, but it's also what you're going to be fueling your powers and your feats. So if you've got a really powerful attack, I don't want to make things like encounter powers, right, from 4th E. And I don't want to have like spell slots. Like, I want you to have a lot more customization in this game. And so I think what I'm going to do is that powers will cost percentage of your pool points, right? So now in combat, let me put it here. In combat, what will reduce soul points? Question mark. And those things that will reduce soul points are taking hits, right? Using powers or feats, and then using effort, right? Which was the ability to succeed on rolls, right? Increasing ability. So I love this. I think this is really cool because now you're talking about the idea that yes, I want to buy a bunch of stuff because I want to be cool and I want to have lots of like flexibility. But at the same time, if I buy a ton of stuff, I might have very little soul points to begin the game with, which means that I might take, one, if I take too many hits, I'm out. Two, I also have to make sure that I'm not getting hit because I'm going to be burning that to use powers and use effort possibly to do stuff. So I like this idea. Now, with that in mind, so now let me change this to power points, right? Or soul points. With that in mind, I thought what might be really cool is that when you think about the defender archetype, right? And you think about like a fighter, they're the tanky ones, right? They're the ones that can survive hits and last a long time. So I thought to represent that, you have the powers that is underneath the defender tree cost less power points to use, right? So now what that means is that you could have, that sort of represents the concept of like a defender power costs less to use, which means that you're not draining your soul power as quickly, which means you have technically more hit points. Whereas someone like a striker, maybe striker powers are going to be a little bit more expensive, right? And so this now becomes like your character design is that, remember that you can buy any powers you want from different trees and you can have like a very balanced or blended character, but understanding that when I dip striker, yes, I might be able to do massive damage, but at the same time that taps my hit points, where if I go defender, I can do some really cool stuff maybe in the sake of defending and it doesn't take as much powers, right? Now granted, all these powers, maybe the balancing act is also how much it costs to buy powers. We'll see. We'll get there when we actually start building out the trees. For this one, I just kind of made up some powers, or at least I have some ideas off the top of my head for some powers. And I have no idea how much they're going to cost. So we're going to figure that out kind of together. So I liked the idea of we already went over zones and abilities. So these are some thoughts I had for a defender. Let's say that the defender wants to try and engage people, because when people are engaged, they're now pretty much just kind of attacking you a little bit more, or other people can kind of get away and move around, right? We don't have a specific taunt yet, but we'll probably have to add one in for the defender. That would make sense. But let's say when you engage one person, you can engage a second. Let's do second. And this will have to cost some sort of like, is this passive? Does this automatically happen? Or is there a soul point cost, right? We don't know that yet. So let's, we'll just make this kind of red or something. These videos might get a little long. I should have probably put this at the beginning, that these videos might get a little long, and so you can just skip to the end to see the end result. Let's put a taunt in there. I just mentioned it. So maybe we have something like, well, not a taunt. Let's say, let's do cover, right? You may grant, this person may grant cover to an ally who is in the same zone, right? Once again, passive or soul point cost. Not sure yet. Not sure yet. But the idea here being that now this means you can reduce or improve defense roll for friend, for ally. But that's not the same as a taunt, right? A taunt would be the idea that you're making someone, they're forcing them to attack you. Maybe this guy won't have a taunt. Maybe we won't get there, because I have no idea what that might look like. What about another one for defense is, if this game so far we got this movement zone, that how about when you engage someone who is engaged with an ally, that ally can disengage, right? So now we're allowing someone some freedom, right? We're defending that person by coming in and freeing them up, because I don't think that's controlling, right? I think that you're kind of pushing something around and you're helping your friend. You could say that's kind of a controller move, and technically this person is kind of going secondary controller, but you know, I like that. I think that's cool. And then finally, let's actually say this guy's going controller, and let's say I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's say that this is defender powers and let's say this is now a controller power, right? And so, well, this would be interesting because I want to give this guy a whip. I love whips, but I never think that in other games they actually do what I want them to do. So let's make them do what I want them to do. So let's give them a general feat first, right? Let's say general feat of whip specialist. I have no idea what that does, but I think that if you're going to have a controller power that's based off a whip, that you should have had some sort of like spec into whip. So I don't know how that works, but it makes sense to me. And let's say that you can grapple, use whip to grapple grapple and not be engaged, right? So the idea being that normally this is making the assumption that if I'm going to grapple a target, I have to first engage them and then I can keep them from moving. So let's say that now what you're doing is you're whipping somebody and you don't have to be engaged with them, but now you've got them grappled. So now they can't perform a movement action, right? Target can't perform any move. Cool. So I think that's good. I think that's a good starting point, not to get too crazy. Soul points, I don't know. Let's see what 25 looks like. You know, let's see what 25 hit points look like, because I have no idea what the damage is going to be yet. We're going to be messing around with the math. I don't know what the average damage output is going to be for the enemy just yet. So let's start with 25 and see what happens. Actually, I like 30. Let's just do 30 because I just think it's a cool number. All right, so this is a nice little starting point. I think this is a good starting point for our defender, and we will see where this goes. All right. I'm going to try and do the striker and maybe the controller this week also. So those coming up, hopefully this one will be up. When you see this one, those should be up in the next consecutive days, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, and please give me feedback on what you're thinking so far.